They say time heals everything, but no one tells you how long it actually takes, or how much silence you have to live through before your heart learns to breathe again. For years, I waited quietly, patiently for the words I thought would fix everything. I'm sorry. 2 small words, but they never came. And yet, today, as I sit by my window watching the evening light fade across the fields, I realize something. Maybe forgiveness doesn't wait for an apology. Maybe it begins when we stop expecting one. This is my story of love that turned cold, of words left unspoken, and the quiet peace I found not because they said sorry, but because I finally forgave. My name is Lila. I'm 68 years old, and I live in a small town surrounded by hills and rice fields. The kind of town where everyone knows each other, where the mornings smell like wet earth and tea. I wasn't always alone. Once, this house was full of laughter, music, and the sound of footsteps running down the hallway. My husband, Arun, was a school teacher. He loved books more than anything. And my daughter, Mira, she was our sunshine. She had his eyes and my temper. When Mira was little, she'd climb into my lap every evening, holding her storybook. "Read again, Ma," she'd say, even if I'd already read it twice. And I would, because nothing felt better than her little arms around my neck and the sound of her sleepy giggle. We were simple people. We didn't have much, but we had love. And back then, I thought love was enough. But life has a way of changing things without asking permission. Arun passed away when Mira was 20. A sudden heart attack. He left one morning for school and never came back. I remember the phone call. The way my hands shook so badly, I dropped the receiver. The silence that followed after the ambulance drove away. That night, Mira didn't cry. She just sat on the steps, hugging her knees. And I didn't know what to say. From that day on, it was just us, 2 mother and daughter against the world. Or so I thought. Mira became quieter. She'd leave early for college, come home late. Sometimes I'd stay up waiting, pretending to sew. But really, I was just listening for her key in the lock. I wanted to help her heal. But grief makes its own rules. I'd try to talk about her father, but she'd just say, "Can we not do this now, Ma?" And I'd nod, because I didn't want to lose her too. She graduated, got a job in the city, and one day she called me. "Ma, I met someone." Her voice sounded light again, alive. His name was Raj. When I met him, I thought he seemed kind, polite smile, nice manners. But something about his eyes, quiet, distant, made me uneasy. Still, I told myself I was just being protective. Mira loved him. That should have been enough. They got married in a small ceremony. She looked beautiful, like her father's smile had returned just for that day. I remember thinking, this is what healing looks like. After the wedding, they moved to the city, and the phone calls became shorter, then fewer. "Ma, we're busy. Work is stressful. I'll visit soon." But soon never came. It started small, a missed birthday call, a forgotten festival, a visit canceled at the last minute. At first, I understood. Life in the city is fast. I told myself she was just busy. But sometimes, when I'd call, Raj would answer. His tone was polite, but distant. "Mira's busy right now, Auntie." Auntie. That word stung more than I expected. Months turned into a year, and one evening, I got a message. "Ma, we bought a new apartment." I smiled, happy for her. I asked when I could come visit. There was a long pause before she replied, "Maybe later, Ma. The house is small. We're still settling in." That night, I sat alone at the dinner table. The food tasted different. Maybe because I'd cooked for one person again. Festivals came and went. Neighbors dropped by with sweets and laughter. I'd smile, pretending everything was fine. But inside, something kept whispering, "You're being forgotten." One winter, I fell sick. Nothing serious, just fever and weakness. But the house felt colder than usual. I called Mira, my voice trembling. "I just wanted to hear you." She said she'd call back later. She didn't. 3 days passed. I sat on the veranda, wrapped in a shawl, watching the postman pass by without stopping. It was then I realized how invisible I had become. When she finally did call, her voice was irritated. "Ma, you can't keep calling like this. I have work. Raj has meetings. Please try to understand." Understand. That word again. I hung up, quietly. From that day, I stopped calling first. Weeks went by, then months. I learned to live in silence, to cook smaller portions, to watch television alone, to pretend I didn't mind, but I did. The hurt didn't come all at once. It came in waves, like a tide that retreats and then returns, stronger each time. One day, my neighbor's daughter came home to visit her mother. The laughter, the noise, the joy, it echoed into my house through the thin walls. And for the first time, I cried out loud. Not because Mira wasn't there, but because I had spent my whole life loving people who no longer needed me. 3 years later, I got a letter. Not from Mira, from a friend of hers. She said Mira had a baby, a little girl, and that they hadn't told me because, as Raj said, "You live too far away." I read that line over and over again. You live too far away. Distance, I realized, isn't always measured in miles. I sat there, holding that letter, feeling like someone had quietly erased my name from their life. For months, I waited for a photo, a call, anything. Nothing came. Then one day, out of nowhere, Mira called. Her voice was different, tired, softer. "Ma," she said, "Raj and I, we're separating." I didn't ask why. I just listened. She cried for the first time in years, and I said the only thing I could think of, "Come home." When she arrived, she looked fragile. Her eyes were swollen, her hair messy. In her arms, she held my granddaughter, a tiny bundle wrapped in pink. I wanted to hold her, but Mira hesitated. "Be careful, Ma," she said sharply, as if I'd forgotten how to hold a baby. For a moment, I felt small again, like I had to prove I still mattered. But I said nothing. I just smiled. Days passed. We lived together again. Awkwardly at first. She worked from home, barely talking. Sometimes I'd overhear her whispering on the phone. "Ma just doesn't understand." I wanted to tell her, "I understand more than you think." One evening, it rained heavily. The power went out. We sat together in the dark, lit only by a candle. The baby slept in my lap. I whispered, "Do you remember when you were little, how you hated the dark?" She smiled faintly. "Yeah." For a moment, we sat in silence. Then she said softly, "Ma, I'm sorry." My heart stopped. Those words I'd waited years to hear. But when they finally came, they didn't bring relief. They brought peace. I looked at her, tears in my eyes, and said, "It's all right, Mira. You don't have to apologize. I already forgave you." She looked confused. "When?" "The day you stopped calling." She started crying quietly, and for the first time in a long time, she rested her head on my shoulder. That night, we didn't talk much. We didn't need to. Forgiveness doesn't always need words. Sometimes it's just the act of staying when you could have left. One evening, it rained heavily. The power went out. We sat together in the dark, lit only by a candle. The baby slept in my lap. I whispered, "Do you remember when you were little, how you hated the dark?" She smiled faintly. "Yeah." For a moment, we sat in silence. Then, she said softly, "Ma, I'm sorry." My heart stopped. Those words I'd waited years to hear. But when they finally came, they didn't bring relief. They brought peace. I looked at her, tears in my eyes, and said, "It's all right, Mira. You don't have to apologize. I already forgave you." She looked confused. "When?" "The day you stopped calling." She started crying quietly, and for the first time in a long time, she rested her head on my shoulder. That night, we didn't talk much. We didn't need to. Forgiveness doesn't always need words. Sometimes, it's just the act of staying when you could have left. It's been 5 years since then. The house isn't as quiet anymore. My granddaughter, Tara, runs through the same halls Mira once did. Her laughter fills the rooms again. Every morning, I watch the two of them together, mother and daughter, and I smile, knowing the cycle continues. But maybe this time, it will be gentler. People often ask me if I regret waiting all those years. I don't, because waiting taught me patience, and forgiveness taught me freedom. Sometimes, the apology you want never comes, but the peace you deserve will. Once you let go, love, I've learned, doesn't end with distance. It just waits quietly until you're ready to open the door again.